Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a massive geopolitical maneuver spanning thousands of miles across the Asia-Pacific. We are breaking down Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's monumental 6-day diplomatic road trip in July 2026. This isn't just a routine series of handshakes. Actually, scratch that. It is a highly calculated tour with immense geopolitical weight. We're talking about economies that together account for trillions of dollars in global GDP. We're going to use the official schedules, diplomatic press releases, and detailed reports to figure out exactly what's happening, why it matters, and what it means for the future of the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, let's dive into this and map out the physical journey. The pace here is incredibly brisk. From July 6th to the 8th, the Prime Minister touches down in Indonesia. Directly following that, from the 8th to the 10th, the delegation moves south to Australia. And finally, the tour wraps up with a highly significant stop in New Zealand from July 10th to the 11th. In just 6 days, we are seeing vast geographic and diplomatic ground covered.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The ACT strategy. 2. Indonesia and securing critical minerals. 3. Deepening Australia ties. 4. A historic New Zealand visit. And 5. The power of the diaspora. Let's get started. Section 1. The ACT East strategy. India's maritime pivot. So the whole foundation of this trip really rests on what's called India's ACT East policy. As outlined by the Ministry of External Affairs, this isn't a completely brand new concept, but the execution of it has drastically accelerated recently. ACT East is essentially India's strategic initiative to deepen economic, security, and cultural ties right in its extended neighborhood in the eastern maritime zones. Following engagements with Mauritius, Seychelles, and Japan, New Delhi's focus has firmly shifted toward the Indian Ocean and the broader Asia-Pacific. Now, why does this matter to you? Well, the Indian Ocean is the primary transit route for a massive chunk of global commerce. By stepping up as an anchor of stability in these waters, India is directly influencing the security of global supply chains, and, by extension, the price of goods we all rely on every single day.
Section 2. Stop 1. Indonesia. Securing critical minerals. To really grasp what's happening in Jakarta with Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto, you have to understand a pretty stark contrast. On one side, you've got India, an economy that is aggressively pushing towards advanced tech and electric vehicles. That means they have a critically high reliance on foreign imports for battery metals, specifically nickel. On the flip side, you have Indonesia, sitting comfortably as the world's absolute largest producer of nickel. And the catch, Indonesia isn't just exporting raw dirt anymore. They've implemented a strict downstreaming policy, essentially banning raw exports to force countries to build processing plants locally. So this visit, it's not just a diplomatic courtesy, it is economically urgent. India's EV ambitions are entirely dependent on solving this exact supply chain puzzle. They're actively seeking to secure these metals while simultaneously working to become way less dependent on China for their supply chains.
Just to put the sheer scale of Indonesia's resource wealth into perspective, think about this number: 2.6 million metric tons. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, that is exactly how much nickel Indonesia mined just last year. That is enough nickel to build batteries for millions of EVs sitting right in Jakarta's backyard. But because of those export bans we just talked about, securing access means fundamentally changing the global playbook.
So how are they bridging this gap? The answer is targeted joint venture plans. Indian ambassador to Indonesia, Sandeep Chakravarti, confirmed that New Delhi really wants to work with Indonesia on moving up that critical minerals value chain. They're looking into setting up factories and manufacturing hubs right there in Indonesia, working directly alongside Indonesia's sovereign fund, Dina Nantara. This is a textbook example of nations bypassing traditional supply chains to build their own direct, resilient pipelines. The payoff? Assured offtake of processed minerals for India. But it's not all purely transactional. This visit also locks in key agreements in healthcare, education, and space. And on a really interesting cultural note, PM Modi's itinerary includes a trip to Yogyakarta to collaborate on the conservation of the Prambanan Temple, which is a beautiful UNESCO World Heritage Site. It just adds some genuine historical depth to this modern economic partnership.
Section 3. Stop 2. Australia. Deepening strategic ties.
Now, as the delegation flies south to Melbourne for the 3rd annual Leader Summit, the tone of this stop is perfectly captured by the host, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Now, what's really interesting about this is his specific choice of the word consequential. He said the Australia-India relationship has never been more consequential, and our partnership fosters peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. In diplomatic speak, calling a relationship consequential is huge. It means it directly impacts the global order. It's a very clear acknowledgement that India is a critical economic partner and an absolutely necessary ally for maritime security.
This consequential relationship is formalized under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, and the Melbourne summit is packed. The leaders, alongside top business executives at the India-Australia CEOs Forum, are expanding trade and defense cooperation. They're advancing cybersecurity frameworks, building supply chain resilience, which, by the way, directly echoes that critical minerals strategy we just saw in Indonesia, and they're developing emerging technologies. But hovering above all of this is their mutual membership in the Quad grouping, alongside the US and Japan. The Quad essentially functions as a democratic counterweight in the region, coordinating on maritime security and disaster relief. The overarching macro theme here is undeniable. They are aligning economic and strategic might to ensure a stable, open Indo-Pacific region based on international law.
Section 4, Stop 3, New Zealand, a historic visit.
The diplomatic tour then crosses the Tasman Sea to Auckland for a meeting with Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Why is this one historic? Because of a massive gap, 40 years. The last time an Indian Prime Minister paid an official visit to New Zealand, the internet as we know it didn't even exist. 4 decades is literally an eternity in geopolitics. So this visit is fundamentally about closing that massive gap and modernizing a relationship that had, quite frankly, been pretty dormant at the highest executive levels. But thankfully, they aren't starting from scratch. So the crucial point is that this visit is riding a massive wave of momentum generated by a free trade agreement that was signed between the two nations just a few months prior, back in April 2026. This FTA is acting as a powerful catalyst. Prime Minister Luxon even called it a winning partnership. Because those trade foundations are now set in stone, the two leaders are using this Auckland summit to expand discussions into bold new frontiers: maritime security, advanced technology, education, tourism, and sports. Think about how rare it is to move from a basic trade agreement to broad security and technology talks in just a matter of months. It truly highlights the aggressive, forward-looking speed of India's eastern pivot.
Section 5, The Power of the Diaspora, a Shared Future.
As we pull back and look at the entire 6-day journey, there is one common human thread tying all 3 of these distinct nations together with India, and the numbers are absolutely staggering. We're talking about 140,000 people of Indian origin in Indonesia, 300,000 in New Zealand, and nearly 1 million people in Australia. And this brilliantly illustrates the human bridge between these economies. At every single stop on this tour, Jakarta, Melbourne, and Auckland, Prime Minister Modi scheduled large-scale diaspora engagements. These communities are the vital, living pillars of the ACT's policy. They're the ones driving the educational exchanges, the tourism, the business investments, and the cultural understanding that make all those high-level government memorandums actually work in practice.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look to the horizon. From securing the raw materials of the future in Indonesia, to aligning military and strategic frameworks in Australia, and reawakening historic ties in New Zealand, India is aggressively cementing its role in the East. Which leaves us with a massive question to ponder. As India locks down critical minerals, defense pacts, and trade routes, are we witnessing the end of the traditional East-West power dynamic and the dawn of a truly multipolar Indo-Pacific? It's a dynamic shift with real-world consequences for every major economy on Earth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.